Well, let's get more perspective on this. We love each and every Monday a chance to reflect on the episodes the night before. Last night was episodes 7 and 8 of The Last Dance. We bring in the amazing director, Jason Hehir, joining us here today. Jason, good morning. How are you? Oh, Jason, you got us?
Yep.
There you are. How are you?
Hey, buddy.
I'm great. How you guys doing?
Amazing. We had said, you told us, I think after the first 2 episodes, I think Dave asked you, do you have a favorite? You said you loved all the episodes, but you said if I had to pick, maybe it's 7, and now I think I know why. That was absolutely amazing. How does it feel to make Michael Jordan cry?
I think it's easier than you might expect. If you Google Michael Jordan crying, I think a couple of things might come up.
Yes.
Jason, well, let's. I was going to save this for later, but since we're on it, I have a 2-parter here, Pally. Number one, how early in the process? I would imagine you had, I believe, 3 interviews with Michael. How early in the process did that answer come where he broke down a little bit? And then secondly, I got to imagine you as the filmmaker sitting there going, oh my God, this piece is so powerful. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is the amount of discipline to save that for episode 7 and not hook with it earlier. What kind of thought process went in there in both the discipline of it and then also, again, when did you get it? I'm curious.
45 minutes into the first interview is when that Q&A took place. So it was very early in the process. I mean, that interview took place almost 2 years ago now. It was June 26, 2018. So that was about 20 minutes after that big cackle laugh for the traveling cocaine circus, which was the first kind of signal that, like, all right, he's come to play. Like, he's going to be honest about this stuff, and you know, his laughter acknowledged that was true, and then he followed it up with that anecdote about being in that hotel room with those guys when he was a rookie. So that was kind of like, all right, I can push a little bit here in this interview. So I had always planned to ask that exact question that's in the show at that moment in the interview, but I certainly didn't expect to get that amount of emotion out of him that early in the process. And then as far as when to use it, of course the temptation is there for a moment like that to come out guns blazing, but it kind of goes back to like my baseball days. You know, if you're pitching in a 9-inning game and you're going to go the distance, then you have to break out some different pitches as you go, and you face batters later on in the game. So you're going to, you know, maybe you throw a slider in the 4th inning. Oral Hershiser is great about this for any baseball nerds out there who want to read this. There's a book called Men at Work, and he described really 3 games in one game. So this was kind of the end of our second game. The end, you know, the middle innings of this thing, that's the end of the second part of this whole series is the end of 7. And I thought that would just be a powerful way to keep things going. I edited that section years ago. That was one of the first things that I sat down and edited because I was just so excited to put that piece of music underneath that soundbite and play around with the B-roll and all that. So we were perfecting it, or not that it's perfect, but we were finishing it up until February, March. But I cut that initial sequence years ago just because I knew that that's something that is such a powerful moment. You figure out where to put it, and then you build around that.
Jason, we had a question, one of our segments, we kind of ask questions and give answers, and one of it was, what's been our favorite part of The Last Dance? And for me, so far, it's Michael's emotion, and I think that part was so powerful. The part where he is sobbing on Father's Day winning the title, I had seen, not heard, though, that audible part, and yet also I enjoy when you give him the iPad and he openly is laughing at Gary Payton or smiling about his mother. Like, Michael's emotions to me are so awesome in this. Just for you to get that out of him, I don't know, how did that feel from your perspective? I know you're trying to get this for the documentary, but you were able to get some amazing stuff from him.
I think that's who he is. We don't see him in that scenario a lot because he's pretty scarce with the sit-down interviews he does. He's very much a public figure, but oftentimes the context in which we see him is, cutting a ribbon at a hospital opening or behind a podium at an NBA Board of Governors press conference or at half court at an All-Star game just smiling for cameras, but we rarely get to see him sit down and have a conversation with somebody. So I don't think there was anything special that I did. I think that's just, you're seeing his personality come out, and it's so rare for us to be exposed to his personality that it looks fresh to us, but that's just the guy he is.
Jason Hehir with us. So in that same segment, Jason, I talked about, obviously, I'll smooch you here a little bit, how proud I am of you and the fact that you and your team are hitting it out of the park with this whole thing under immense pressure. And one of the things, I think one of the MVPs of this documentary are the iPads. I mean, truly, the vehicle you used to get those reactions and how fascinating it is to watch Michael or watch Dennis or watch Scotty react to each other real time. Can you talk a little bit about the genesis of that idea and how all that came about?
Well, it's the closest thing we could do to actually put them in a room with each other. You're not going to get them to sit there and have a candid conversation with each other, and we couldn't even logistically get them in the same room to try and pull that off. So that was, I've always said that I don't know these people, so the reaction is going to be a lot more authentic and visceral when they see a person that they know speaking. I could tell Michael, hey, Gary Payton said that if he guarded you from game one, it would have been a different series. It would have been a similar reaction, but it wouldn't have been, I don't think he would have thrown his head back and cackled. And Gary Payton's just a funny guy anyway. I could listen to Gary Payton talk all day. These guys like music. But the idea for it literally came from the second time that I ever met Jordan, and I forget what we were talking about. I think I was asking him if he had ever been thrown out of a game. And I pulled out my phone and started playing down. There's a YouTube clip that someone made of all of his fights and confrontations that he's had. It's like 7 minutes long, and it's set to music, and it's just like, if you ever need to get pumped up, look that clip up. And he took the phone out of my hands and held it with both of his enormous hands. I mean, the thing looked like a Tic Tac in his hands, an iPhone. But he was locked in and smiling, and then started muttering to himself, like telling stories to those of us. There's just a few people sitting around a table and being like, oh, yeah, this guy got kicked out for that. And I remember that. He elbowed me the play before. And I was thinking, if we can, it doesn't get any cooler for a sports fan to sit there and have Michael Jordan looking at his own highlights and narrating them, and completely entranced. It was almost like a time machine that he was back there, back in a Bulls uniform. So I thought if we can recreate this, then that's going to be gold. So we got something bigger than a Tic Tac. We got the largest iPad that money can buy, and we loaded those clips on. So it became a really useful for the production and useful for the interview process too, because it can be pretty tedious to sit there and answer questions for 3 hours at a time. You need to dangle some shiny objects in front of somebody just to keep them kind of occupied and stimulated. So that was really useful for me to be able, if I saw him kind of drifting or whatever, just to give him that, because it's all about game. He loves games. Anything that can be construed as a game or a challenge or something like that, it's like, okay, play this and tell me what you think.
Jason Hehir, the director of The Last Dance, with us. I find it interesting that you do a great job of pointing out when anybody, Gary Payton, for example, last night, Gary Payton was doing a good job on him, and he'll say, well, I had other things on my mind, or there's a lot of deflecting. He just won't reward anyone else for maybe doing a good job, or a team doing a good job against him. But yet when he was trying to defend his own leadership, his own being a teammate, boy, that sure got him emotional. That's where that crack came in. Why do you think that landed for him as an area that drew out that emotion?
A couple of reasons. One is that I think that what gets him emotional, what he cares more about than anything, is his family and his philosophy on being a teammate and being a winner. So that's when you're going to see him get emotional, is when he's talking about that. You saw him, of course, the meme heard around the world. It's his crying at the Hall of Fame speech. And say what you will about that speech, what he's talking about is his personal philosophy about winning and about what it takes to be great. So that's the kind of thing that elicits that emotion from him. I think that. Sorry, what was the original question? There was another part to it, right?
Well, the other part was how he'll he won't give anyone an inch, like Gary Payton.
Oh, yeah.
He just won't do that.
Yeah, a lot of these guys. I mean, I don't know if I can think of an example of someone saying in this documentary that they regret one of their actions and they would have done it a different way. And that goes for Scotty to Isaiah to Michael to Peyton to everybody. You know, I think these guys are so accomplished, and it took so much hard work to get to where they are. They're just very proud people. But yeah, it was so telling to me that the only time that he did get emotional this entire process in these 2 years was, you know, he teared up when he saw his mom, saw her face, and he heard her voice, and I think it kind of took him back to a time when he didn't have money for stamps. I mean, the guy's a billionaire now, so who knows what was going through his head when he saw his mom speaking like that. And then I think that he genuinely is a nice guy. I've had extremely limited interactions with him. I'm not saying that I'm a friend of his, but in our limited interactions, he's been very respectful to me, to the crew. I've only been with him a handful of times, but I've never seen any, you know, so-called, as Will Perdue would say, a-hole or jerk behavior from him. I'm sure as a teammate, you know, I wasn't I wasn't coming off the bench for the Bulls in the 90s. I'm sure he would have treated me differently then. But I do think I was always interested at the outset of this thing to ask him if he was ambivalent about that image of him being, you know, a ruthless, win-at-all-cost competitive monster, when in fact, away from the court, he is a nice guy. And if he was bothered by that.
Jason Hehir, the director of The Last Dance, joins us as he does every Monday at 8. But before I get to my important question, I got to go back. Where is the iPad right now?
Good question. I think it's still at the office.
Dude, you know that's like a piece of memorabilia right now. That thing's worth a bank. I'm telling you.
I got to go. The Smithsonian is actually on the other line right now, Dave, so I have to go. We're going to negotiate a price. Yeah, it was. It's in the office, and that place has been boarded up since the world shut down.
Some rich dude is going to want that thing to put on their wall and say this was the iPad Michael Jordan laughed at Gary Payton on. I'm just telling you, you're going to have college tuitions to pay here at some point, Jason. Keep that in mind.
Give them my number. Find the rich guy and give him my information.
You know, I'm always curious to hear your takes on, I know you make this, it's your baby, and then the public consumes it. And I always wonder how close the public is and how they consume it to how you meant for them to consume it. So I will just tell you as a viewer, I thought the beginning of this documentary was super fun. I mean, I smiled all the time at it, like the memories, obviously LL Cool J's I'm Bad and that whole thing. And I feel like it has taken a turn. And by the way, I'm not equating fun with quality. I'm not having as much fun in these last few episodes. It's serious, and it's the idol being knocked down and the crap the media puts out there, and obviously his dad and the pressures and all that. When you're creating arcs, Jason, throughout a 10-part documentary, was that something you were consciously aware of, that it would go from fun to heavy, or is that just how it happened to turn out?
No, absolutely. It goes back to that baseball analogy I gave you. You got to keep changing it up. If we wanted to, we could do 10 hours of LL Cool J set to highlights. I don't know if we would have the budget for the music clearance, but we certainly could make it, as you said, fun throughout. But that's not what life was for them in the 90s. Some of it was fun, but some of it was tragic, and some of it was frustrating, and some of it was exhausting and tedious. I think to tell a comprehensive story, you have to show what these guys truly went through, and not just Michael, but what he left in his wake when he was gone in 94 and half of 95, or most of 95, and Scotty trying to lead that team, and whether or not Scotty was capable of being, Batman, and filling those shoes, as Mike Wilbon called him, the Robin to Michael's Batman. There's just so many fascinating elements to it, and fascinating stories always have conflict, and conflict is oftentimes going to be heavier than just fun material. So I knew we were going down that road, and the chronology of the events is what dictates that. So his dad was killed in '93, and that's where we were in the story when we were going to tell that story. I think that what you'll see next week, there's going to be some more heavy elements to the stories next week, but ultimately, we all know what happened in '98, so it's triumphant by the end. But I think that you don't get that feeling of triumph unless you show the hardships that people had to overcome.
Jason, you talked about his ruthless win-at-all-costs mentality. It's obvious when he's playing baseball, he's driven, he works hard, he's trying to be great. But did he have that same kind of impact in the clubhouse/locker room or the dugout, let's say, as that kind of tyrant mentality? That's tougher to do in baseball, and he wasn't the best at it. He was really good, but he wasn't. Did he just kind of go along for the ride along with that incredible drive to be great?
Yeah, because he is vocal. We saw that last night, but I think that he leads more by example than through words. And he couldn't lead by example in baseball because he wasn't the most talented guy in the clubhouse. I think it was good for him in a lot of ways. First of all, I don't think they win that second three-peat unless he took that time off. I think that he was completely exhausted mentally and physically and spiritually. I think he was out of gas and needed that in order to reset and frankly to grieve the loss of his dad. He needed to go somewhere else, and it's not like he escaped the spotlight. That's the funny part, is I'm going to go play minor league baseball so I can escape the cameras. Well, the cameras are coming, Michael. Wherever you go, they're going to be there. But I also think it humbled him. I think it made him a better teammate. He, by all accounts, there were no cameras there like there were in '97, '98, but by all accounts, he was even more demanding in that first three-peat run. But I think he got humbled, and I think he saw that it doesn't come as easy to everybody as it comes to me. A lot of players find this out when they're managers of baseball teams. Like Ted Williams was a notoriously bad manager because he couldn't understand how things didn't come naturally to some people because he was so gifted, and he never saw it any other way. Michael, after baseball, I think if he was a tyrant, it was about effort. It wasn't about performance and results. Because I think he understood, not everybody can be as great as he is. Not everybody has, a bread and butter turnaround 15-footer that they can bank every single time. They can put in the bank every time they touch the ball. There's certain talents. So what he was demanding was effort, not statistical results after baseball.
One of the interesting, to me, sidebars I've been looking forward to being covered in this doc was his year in baseball, year plus. And him looking at that Bulls team without him. And you got to see, you talked about just being a fan, and it's impossible not to watch. And this is an unfair question for you, Jason. I'm just going to ask you to be a fan because, as you said, you spent some time with Michael, but very limited interaction. As a fan, your best guess, do you think Michael was 100% rooting for that Bulls team the first year he was gone? And how much of his competitive nature do you think, maybe not rooting against them, but felt if the Bulls were to win a title the year after he retired, that maybe it might tarnish some of his legacy? How do you think he adjusted between those two feelings, if he even had them?
I don't think he was rooting against them. And again, you said it's a tough question. I have no way of knowing that, but
Sure.
I think that he would have had to be angry at somebody to root against them. He would have had to want to be vindictive against somebody. Now, maybe Krause, but I don't think so. I think that he was watching as a fan, and I think that he wasn't rooting against them because he was hell-bent on staying away from the game. If that strike doesn't happen in '94, '95, we're not having this conversation. I firmly believe that. I firmly believe he would have made the majors. He wouldn't have been an all-star, but he would have made the majors, and he would have retired as a baseball player. That's just my conjecture. I have no way of knowing that for sure, but he had every intention of doing so. The straw that broke the camel's back for him really was it was a major league strike or a lockout, and they wouldn't let him. This was like the nail in the coffin. They wouldn't let him park his car inside the grounds when he came to work out because they literally had locked out the players. So he had to park on the highway outside of the complex in order to come and work out. And he was swarmed. And he just felt that it was so ungrateful. Like he's there. He certainly is helping the organization by being there. And they're going to do this to him. They wouldn't let him park in private. So I think that was when he said, you know what, I don't need this. And he certainly wasn't going to he wasn't going to cross the line Everybody knew that in and out of baseball. Michael Jordan's not going to cross a picket line and be a scab. So, but if that doesn't happen, I think that he would have stayed, and therefore I think that he was rooting for the Bulls all along.
Well, much like the episodes, they all go too fast. So does our time with you, Jason. You're so generous with us on Monday. What's funny is I know Jordan, before this started, said, I think a lot of people are going to watch this and think differently of me and may not be fans of me. I don't know when that part's going to happen. I'm enjoying the heck out of him. Like that. Like I even have more respect for him now.
I think because he's human.
Yeah.
We're seeing a human side of him, and we're seeing, not necessarily flaws, but you're certainly seeing emotion. It's very easy to ascribe whatever characteristics we want to ascribe to somebody if they're just kind of on a poster or they're just smiling in a suit and being handsome and being friendly and not giving us much in the way of personality. But when he sits down and you see him laughing and you see him crying and you see him reacting to things in the moment, he becomes a human being and not just a statue. And it's tough not to like him.
Yeah.
And I know we're up against it, but I got to ask you because final 2 episodes this Sunday. Give us your best, logline preview going in. What do we expect from the wrap of this monstrosity of awesome? What should we look forward to?
Monstrosity of awesome. That was a working title for a while there. We went with Last Dance, but I think you'll see 2 of the toughest series, maybe the 2 toughest series that Michael played in with the Bulls, and you've seen some tough series already. But the Indiana series. Eastern Conference Final in '98, which is what we're tackling in Episode 9, is only the second time in all those championship runs that they were brought to a Game 7. And those guys were on their last legs, and of course they won that, and they had to get right on a plane and go play Utah. The next day they had to fly out to play Utah, and Utah had been waiting for a week resting up. So you're going to see flu game next week. You're going to see a lot of Reggie Miller stuff next week. The iPad comes back out a couple of times with a lot of entertainment to go along with it. We also do a deep dive into maybe my favorite backstory of the entire series, which is Steve Kerr's story about his dad and his family and all that. So there's a lot we have to get to. And also there's probably more access in those 2 series than there has been those 2 playoff series. There has been the entire television series so far because the players were so comfortable with the cameras at that point that the cameras are following them everywhere. So there's a lot of fun stuff next week.